Hello everybody, my name is James Stevenson. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a student at the University of South Wales studying computer security. I'm actually graduating next month. As well as that, this time last year as an intern at LitLogic, a cloud security company. I also run a computer security blog where I write news, reviews and things along those lines. I'm telling you this now so later down the road you can kind of understand the decisions I've made and the conclusions I've come to. So I do have a tendency for talking a bit fast, so if I do that during the talk, find something soft, throw it at me and I'm sure we'll work it out. So to start with, no good presentation starts without a quote, right? And this presentation is just like that. We've got a quote here by IBM. Preemptive security is the only way to keep security and cost-conscious organizations ahead of the threat. What does that mean, right? It's a bit buzzwordy. What does that actually mean? Well, what it's pretty much saying is it's saying preemptive security is what we need to be doing moving forward, right? We need to be thinking of these new ways, thinking outside the box to secure ourselves and our customers. And preemptive security is one such way. Now, a form of preemptive security is offender profiling, and offender profiling is what I'm going to be talking about today. So offender profiling is the means in which we look at a malicious actor, we look at a hacker and derive motives, we sort of do comparisons and we figure out what's happening. We say, this attack is related to this attack is related to one you had last week, we think this might be the motive of the malicious actor, these are the attacks they're using, and things along those lines. And that's really what offender profiling is about. An example I like giving about offender profiling is, let's say we have a Norwegian hacker group, right? This Norwegian hacker group continues to DOS one of our customers. We can use offender profiling techniques to look at when they are attacking our customers, right? So maybe they have a sustained attack every day between 1 and 6, and for the rest of the day, it's drips and drabs. So using that, and using that offender profiling profile, we can give that information to our customers and tell them, okay, put load balancers in place at this time, and for the rest of the day, have your normal capacity. And using offender profiling techniques, that allows our customers to save money in the long run, but also secures them when necessary. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to be talking about offender profiling and how it's pretty awesome and how we can use it in the real world. So how am I going to be breaking this up? So I'm going to be talking about what offender profiling is. I briefly spoke about it, but I also want to talk about why it's important. Then I'm going to be talking about what already exists, right? What some great organizations are currently doing and what techniques exist. Then I'm going to be talking about this framework I created, right? As part of my dissertation project, I created a framework. It's broken into 7 modules, and it's designed to allow companies, big and small, to create profiles of malicious actors. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And I really want to encapsulate this on how offender profiling allows us to build these bigger pictures of malicious actors. So to start with, why is offender profiling important? Right. So this is a quote by the Los Angeles police chief, and it's about predictive policing, right? So I changed one word and said, okay, yeah, now it's to do with offender profiling, because that's what offender profiling is all about. What it's saying is we're not getting more money, we're not getting more staff. We have to use what we have now effectively. And that's what security is about, right? That's what offender profiling is about, because security is less of a buzzword than it once was, right? There's no more endless budgets. Security administrators, security teams, security operations centers have to use what they have effectively. And I think offender profiling really helps in this. It really allows us to spend a little now, to do a little research now, to save a lot in the long run. So that's why offender profiling is important. But why is security important? So this is a stat from Malware Tech, and it's to do with WCRY. And I'm sure the number is significantly larger than this now. However, what it's saying over 283,000 devices were compromised by WCRY. And that's quite a lot. And what that tells us is it says, yeah, security is changing. That's quite obvious. I don't think we'd be here today if we didn't believe that. But it's not going anywhere, right? Security is here for the long run. And that, compared with what we just talked about with offender profiling, the idea of offender profiling is needed because security is changing. I think those two really go hand in hand. So, what already exists, right? What's currently done in the field of offender profiling? Well, there are some great organizations doing white papers, right, on some hacker groups and some malicious actors. This one here is probably the first white paper I ever read, and it's by Mandiant, and it's on APT1, a Chinese hacker group that targets Western organizations. So this is one great white paper, and it really looks at offender profiling. It really looks at who these malicious actors are, what are their motives, what they do, and it's a really great paper. We have another one here by F-Secure. And this one is quite similar. It looks into the Callisto group, looks at their motives, look at what they do, and things along those lines. And we've got one more here by McAfee, and this is McAfee's annual threat report. Once again, looks into malicious actors, looks into offender profiling. So what we can see from this is that we can see that there's some great organizations that are doing work in the space of offender profiling, doing work in the space of preemptive security, and looking into these malicious actors. So the question must be asked, why did I decide to do my dissertation project? Why did I decide to spend a year's work in offender profiling? And why did I think something else needed to change? And that's a question I'll answer in a little bit. Before that, however, we'll talk about some techniques that exist. This is a model by Lockheed Martin. It's called the cyber kill chain. It's broken up into 7 sections. We've got stages such as reconnaissance, weaponization, actions, and objectives. And it really allows us to visualize a malicious actor, right? It really allows us to see what's happening and what the malicious actor is doing. We've got another model here. This one's called the diamond model. It's broken up into 4 sections. It's broken up into adversary, capabilities, victim, and infrastructure. And once again, really allows us to see what a malicious actor is doing, really allows us to visualize that malicious actor, and really allows us to create those profiles, those frameworks of the malicious actors. So coming back to that question, if all this great work is already here, right? Some great organizations are currently profiling, some great organizations have created these tools and techniques. Why did I decide to tackle offender profiling? Why did I think it was important to tackle offender profiling? So as I said, I worked in a SOC. I worked in a SOC for about 10 months as an intern. And the SOC worked really well, right? How the SOC would work is you'd have a customer, they've had an IDS, an intrusion detection system, they'd monitor for malicious traffic, and then when they saw malicious traffic, they'd send that traffic to the SOC, the Security Operations Center. An analyst in the SOC would then review that traffic. They'd say, okay, what's happening? Is this a false positive? Is this a false negative? And then they'd send remediation on how to fix the problem back to the customer. And it's a really great cycle, right? It's a really great cycle that allows you to quickly get that remediation and fix problems. The main problem I saw with this, however, was we weren't cross-referencing attacks, right? We weren't looking at the bigger picture. We were looking at one attack at a time. So my recommendation is to append something to this, right? Let's append and let's bolt on a framework. So when the customer sends us that attack data, we take it into the SOC and we deal with that as normal, but also we take some of that data and we put it through a framework, right? We put it through a framework that allows us to profile the malicious actor. It allows us to look at what's happening, what attacks are they using, have we seen stuff like this before? And then either as a weekly report or alongside that remediation, we can send that to the customer, right, to build that bigger picture, to visualize the malicious actor. It can be an executive summary, it can be a technical report, it's really up to who's using the framework. So, that's why the framework is important, but what is the framework, right? So as I said, I built this framework as part of my bachelor's in science for my dissertation project, and the framework is broken up into 7 modules. These modules vary in attack significance, impact, likelihood, risk, what attacks tools were used, what stage are they in the attack, things like this. And as I said, 7 modules, they can be used one at a time, they can be used all together, and what they are really here for is to build that bigger picture, of the malicious actors. So today I'm going to be talking about 4 of these modules, as we don't have time for all of them. I picked my 4 favourites. I'm going to talk about why I think they're cool, why I think they work, and kind of why they're interesting. Before I talk about that, however, I want to talk a bit about data. Right? I want to talk about how data is put into this framework. So at the moment, this framework is manual, right? I could pretty much hand you a book that would have this framework in it, and you could do it by hand, and you could follow the steps. In the future, I might look at making this automatic. I might look at maybe implementing this alongside a SOC, but that's really for the future to tell. So, as I said, I ran a honeypot to get this attack data. However, when making this framework, I really wanted to make it so that you could get your data from a SOC, you could get your data from a honeypot, you could get your data from a one-off attack. So as I said, for this attack specifically, and for the example I'll be using today, I took it from a honeypot. So after putting that data that I chose from a honeypot, from one of the malicious actors, from a US IP address, put it into a spreadsheet, and this is the data I'll be using for the rest of this demo, for the 4 modules. So for our first module, module 2, this module looks at attack significance, Right? It looks at how significant an attack is, and it looks at that compared to longevity. Right? It says the longer an attack is, the more significant it is. That's not always the case, but it's a good baseline. So we take that data from the spreadsheet that we just had, and we put it into this new spreadsheet. Now, as I said, this can be done by hand or using a tool, but for today I used a spreadsheet. And we get graphs that look like this. And the way these graphs work is if multiple attacks happen in a time frame, it doubles, or it escalates. You know, it doesn't quite double, but there's some maths behind it, but let's say it doubles. And then if an attack doesn't occur in a time frame, it depreciates, it half-lives. So we get these peaks and we get these troughs. So comparing what we can see here with other attack data, we can start looking at trends, right? We can start saying, is there a pattern behind these attacks? You know, in this example here, maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But once again, is it a great visualization tool to allow you to visualize and allow you to see the malicious actor and analyze what is happening? Our next module, Module 3, and the second module for today. Module 3 really took its inspiration from the risk rating methodology of OWASP and asks the analyst to answer a series of statements with a number. Now these numbers at first might appear arbitrary, right? They might appear a bit abstract. But what they are done, they're based off an information classification, which is another module in itself. And that module says, how much do we value our assets, right? Are they high risk? Are they low risk? What's really happening here? And that's where these numbers come from. So after we've entered those numbers, we get graphs that look like this. And these graphs allow us to visualize, once again, allow us to understand the malicious actor, to see them as not just a hacker, but as a person, as a group, and as an attack, as it were. So, once again, visualizing that data. And what we're really doing in this module, we're really looking at risk. So taking those two graphs, we can work out our risk, and that's done by likelihood times impact equals risk. Now these numbers might appear quite low, but that's because it's against a honeypot, right? It's designed to be vulnerable, so these numbers are quite low. So, module 4, right, or our fourth module I should say, probably the most comprehensive, our third module, probably the most comprehensive of all of the modules. This module looks at a series of statements or a series of questions that a security analyst has to answer. Questions such as, what attacks were used? Do they leave any calling signs? Is the attack likely to happen again? Things like this that can be answered high or low level and can be given to an analyst or a customer as an executive report or a technical summary really allow you to start visualizing the malicious actor, really allow you to start delving deep into who they are and what they're doing. So that's why I think that module is important. Having that insightful data is so important in a framework. So, module 4, the fourth module for today. This module isn't necessarily to do with profiling, but instead to do with categorizing. Right? I wanted a naming convention for malicious actors that could be instantly recognizable, but also sub-unique. So what we can see here, we have US APR 46. And what that stands for is originating from the United States, first occurrence in April, risk level 4, and last octet 6. Now that last octet is there to give it that sub-uniqueness, right? So we can have these naming conventions that are slightly different and from different malicious actors. So those are the modules, and those are 4 of the modules from this framework. As I said, there are 7 in total, and if you're interested in looking at more of them, they can be found online on my website. And I really hope looking at those modules, right, looking at that framework as a whole, has really allowed you to see that and how important it is to look at these events, not just at one attack at a time, but as an entire event, right? As an entire cluster of events, and that they're all linked. So I think that's what's really important, right? And I think this quote summarizes that pretty well, right? It says, intrusion analysis is much about TCP dump as astronomy is about telescopes. And I think what that's really saying is it's saying that we need to be looking at security from a broader angle. We can't just be looking at it very specific. We can't be looking at specific tools. We can't be looking at specific events. We need to be understanding security as a whole. We need to be looking at malicious actors as a whole and not just individual occurrences. So, thank you for your time. I've been James Stevenson. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me now. Come find me afterwards, Or as I said, I run a website, so you can come find me on there. Once again, thank you.